Hey everybody. Welcome to my neighborhood. Normally, these days when you see me making videos, I'm outside and most often I'm in the botanical gardens, which is the coolest really living place somewhere near me, although there's another pretty weird living place near me, even though all this stuff is owned, which I find really bizarre. When people own living places, which there aren't really any non-living places, so all places which are owned are actually living places, and they're covered in this kind of shit and this kind of crap and dominated by these kinds of things. And apparently, this situation, which you can see replicated here, is generally understood to be good. It's good because dead stuff is predictable. And when most of the stuff that's unpredictable is dead, you're really likely to think that your predictions are very powerful and you're very intelligent and your knowledge is good. Now, back in some of the creation stories from some of our sky books, right? Books about what everything is and what you're supposed to do. Some of those creation stories imply that there might be some kind of a problem with knowledge. So, those of you who know me, who actually have spoken with me, have certainly heard me riff a lot on Genesis. And I don't riff a lot on Genesis because I'm Hebrew, though I like to think that part of me is. And I don't riff a lot on Genesis because I'm religious, though in a sense, part of me is. Or rather, it's weirder than that, but let's just say I don't dismiss out of hand the remnants of the evolution of our human minds and societies. I was attempting not to inhale an insect there a moment ago, in case for those of you who are super observant. In the Genesis story, we were exiled from the garden, quote unquote. At least that's one way of thinking about it. One of the things I like to do when I'm outside is reverse that situation. I like to go to the garden. And one of the things I like about these large white daisies is that some of them, why would people be wearing masks inside their houses? That doesn't seem good. Although the wearing masks thing, I'm down with that. I have my bandana, which I use. And I'll mention later why I said that, if I remember and stay on thread. So in this Genesis story, there's this problem with knowledge. It's really important that we understand. There's a lot of key features in that story that have nothing to do with whether you're religious or not. If you don't understand them, trouble is coming your way. By the way, here is a female crab spider. I hope I got her in the viewfinder. This is why I like these daisies, is that they have these female crab spiders on them, and sometimes males. Remember I was saying I really like these daisies? Well, that's the reason. Ambush predators are really interesting to me, but I like pretty much everything that's alive. From the tiny things to the gigantic things, to the separate things, to the connected things, to the unified one planet of living being thing, all that stuff. I love that stuff. Ooh, here's some more great things to love. So, there's all this stuff to love here. I'm going to get distracted by loving it. Count on it. I mean, there's hummingbirds, and it's evening, and it's Independence Day, but I'm going to talk about dependence and independence, but in a different kind of way. Because I don't think whatever the heck we're supposed to be celebrating is pretty sketchy at this point, to put it mildly. Now, here's the thing that could actually just be a fire, but instead it's a flower, right? Doesn't that just look like a fire? I mean, this is like an organism that's just blatantly trying to emulate Van Gogh, right? When Van Gogh looked at the sun, he saw stuff like this, right? But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. There's so many things to love here in the garden. And there's this story that the garden, that sort of our people made some kind of mistake, or there was a bad accident or something. And then after that, our people were exiled from the garden, or we exiled ourselves, or something was all wonky. And that is a really important story. And I can speak about that one at length, and I am of a mind to do so, so I'm going to be careful not to, because I have other goals tonight. And I don't have too much time till the sun goes down. Here's something I madly love. Yes, yes, yes. Ah, living beings. They're awesome. So in that story, there's some kind of a problem between sort of the first, maybe like what we could imagine is the, boy, is it going to be hard to pick language here. The celestial template of femininity, or something like this, right? I'm gonna pretend that Eve sort of vaguely resembles this bizarre language. And some kind of a thing that makes divisions as it goes. Really important idea. When a snake travels, right, when a serpent travels, it divides the world into two. There's that side of its path over here, and this side over here. And these sides have been now divided by the passage of this wave-like thing that goes like this, and slithers and stuff. Not to mention the fact that it resembles other things, right? So Eve gets in trouble with something referred to as a serpent in English. I should know the Hebrew word, but again, it's not my goal to tell this story tonight. I'm just going to reference it briefly. And a tree that is not merely in the midst of the garden, but something far more interesting. It is the umbilicus of the garden. That's what is meant by midst. Or something much more like this is meant by midst. It's not middle. And the humans are told, don't mess with that tree in the midst. And it's kind of like they're being told, don't mess with the umbilicus of the earth. Because something's hanging out there. One of the other kinds of children is hanging out there. And if you two kinds of kids get together, you're going to show each other your toys, and it's going to be a big problem because you're going to then have knowledge. You will know stuff. And I know this is going to seem like a really exciting and good thing. And for, thereafter, if you do this, it's going to be about the best thing you have, which won't be very good compared to what you'll lose to get it. And I can't say precisely what it is that gets lost that way. But it's something we might call innocence, and it's also something that we might refer to as intimate participation in being. In the the incredibly ecstatic layers of reverential, adorative beingness that are the garden, right? And so that'll be a lot like death. In fact, God says, don't do this or you'll die. And the serpent, for his part, kind of gets lawyerly about it and goes, well, you won't actually die. God was being hyperbolic. Well, actually, no, he was being metaphoric or simileistic or analogical. He meant a part of you really don't even understand exists because you're never separate from it will go away. And that's part of what knowledge does. And by the way, in case it isn't clear, knowledge is a game of cutting things into parts and arranging them into little skeletal fucking maps and shit. So you probably don't want to trade intimacy for something like that. I don't want a photograph of the skeleton of my mother, even though, hey, I'll get some knowledge from it. It isn't that knowledge isn't amazing. As somebody who has always, been inclined toward intellectuality, though not merely that, and I love learning. I absolutely love to learn. And unfortunately, I think I know things. It's surprising how knowledge kills off stuff like passion and curiosity and insight. Now, it doesn't do it all by itself. There's other things that help, like context and situation, peer pressure, stuff that makes you dumber, like our relationships with machines, particularly mostly with computers and televisions and shit like that. Though there are exceptions. There are ways to use these technologies that at least, we have the same problem with language. Language makes us dumber unless we're really, really careful about how we use it. Because once you know the name of something, you think you know what that something is, and that's knowledge. Now, as you can see, it doesn't really matter how much what you know about something that is, right? It ends the mystery. And when the mystery ends, the participation ends, and you get a little tokenized piece of junk that you can throw at your friend and say, that's a tree, right? And you can confidently believe that you know what that is because you know its name. And knowledge is like this. Knowledge masquerades as intimacy and participation, true understanding, when in fact most of the time what knowledge gives us is overstanding. So we humans have a problem with knowledge, to put it mildly. You also get problems like society's so stupid that their scientific discoveries are absolutely lethal because of the uses to which they will be put. And that actually gets you killed. That's real death, right? And all kinds of other difficult problems that I'm not here to talk about much today. But I just wanted to harken back to this idea of independence. There's some good kinds of independence, and there's some really bad kinds of independence. And independence from sanity or insight, or from the source of being, or from the umbilicus that connects us to nature, is death. You die. Congratulations, you're now independent, and you're gone. Right? Or most of you is gone, or the most important parts of you are gone. And what happened, in a way, in the story in the garden, one way of thinking about it, and there are lots of really useful, intelligent ways to understand this story. This is a story of a great and terrible accident that is not bullshit. And it has nothing to do with whether you believe in God or not. You want to understand this fucking story. Most likely, it's the remnant of long lost, like those books at the beginning of the Bible. Very unlikely they were written in the forms they have today. They look to me like the stitched together fragments of a lost entire book, right? Ooh, feral black cat. Very interested in that. I'm gonna have to check that out. Because I know some black cats around here that are important to me. Or at least the spirit of one that used to be. That's really important to me. We can have intelligent relationships with knowledge, partly by understanding its dangers. The same is true of language. And some people think that knowledge is a lot like the stuff that comes out of these. Which are the beehives at the top of the garden. Very important idea. Above the garden, there were beehives. They aren't mentioned in the book, but above the garden, which is an analog of something itself, there was another analog that was the analog of bees. Yeah. And from the assets in the garden, those meta bees make something like meta honey. You know, it's funny, explosions make people independent. One good explosion, thousands of people become immediately independent. And all that stuff we like about lights in the sky and blah, 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 that stuff's all metaphors. It's physical metaphors of things we've never seen. But those things are the metaphors of insight or sudden, unexpected, catastrophically ecstatic awakening to the fundamental nature of being, or to an intimate relationship with a living place or living beings. Those things we call fireworks, those are analogs of something we are supposed to be able to experience. The humans have this problem with representing things, especially relationships. Money is one of those representations. It's not a good thing. In any case, independence. Well, of course, in our, people will say, Darren, come on, we're talking about the establishment of the United States and its independence from Britain, which was a tyrannical oligarchy, and I'll say, yeah, and look how far we've come. No, I would say other things. I would talk about sea pirates and the indigenous people and the land before our arrival, not meaning mine and yours, but the ancestors of this country, who I don't necessarily feel entirely responsible for the actions of. I am not those people. In any case, the kind of independence that I think is really interesting and potentially good is the kind where, usually after many years of some difficult meditative discipline, someone cuts through the mind. Yeah, they escape the mind labyrinth, the labyrinth of I am a self and I know these things, and this weird kind of problem that we have where we are at once distinct and among many others of our kind. We are independent and dependent. So one of the kinds of independence that I think is good, and there are a number, there's ways of enacting this idea that aren't implicitly only toxic. Obviously, we are absolutely dependent on nature, what we refer to as nature, or living places and living beings, for our lives. So, if you were to become independent from that, you'd be dead. And also, you'd stop participating in the living beings and their relationships and their places. And if those living beings and their relationships and their places that keep you alive just become commodities which you exchange tokens to kill and torture, then you're dying. That's a kind of living death. Because those living places and beings and things that we refer to as food, those are our own bodies and minds. They just happen to be outside the specific local body of Darren, or at least that's one of the ways that I am inclined to understand what's going on. It's not the truth, it's an as-if story. It's a model. It's a theory. But there are kinds of independence, right? Independence from insanity, real insanity. Independence from tyrannical monarchies and oligarchies and plutocracies and aristocracies and shit like this. You know, if intelligently enacted, pretty good stuff. I'm kind of a fan of meritocracies in general, but I wouldn't get too severe about it. Partially because I'm not a huge fan of complex hierarchies. In any case, we're dependently independent all the time. But what I want to talk about today is dependence. Now, I know a number of very intelligent people, and I know a number of very skillful people. And I know some very creative people, and I know people who are pretty sober-minded, right? Like the knowledge and intelligence they're inclined to share and produce is relatively trustworthy. Relatively. Within the contexts where it's trustworthy, and not beyond them. Knowledge is generally trustworthy in contexts. We humans derive our roles primarily from contexts and specifically from relationships within contexts. So we kind of unconsciously read the context usually, although sometimes consciously. And then we unconsciously kind of read the roles and relationships in there, sometimes somewhat consciously. And then we start to play at one of those roles and build relationships within the context and hopefully nurture them. Or, you know, we run away from that whole thing because it's terrifying and imposes a kind of inner social simulation of the possibility of being judged by the people or roles or relationships in the context. It's very complicated, all this stuff. However, there's a couple of simple facts that are useful. And one is, it's very difficult to understand a situation when you yourself are in it, by yourself. And the necessity of having to do this drives people insane. And for many of us, it's not that short of a trip because most of us contain the seeds of various kinds of insanity. And if those seeds are properly, nurtured by isolation, individualism, stress, deprivation, intoxication, or accident, right? Misadventure. If those seeds get properly nourished, we have full-blown insanity. We become psychotic or schizophrenic, or we become subject to mania or bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder or whatever particular little specialization of insanity happens to get the most water in the right circumstances to become floridly expressed in and as our consciousness. And that is a miserable situation, although some forms of genius depend on something very similar or even are sub-symptoms of madness. And this is a very peculiar thing, which is not to be confused with the assertion that madness is prodigy. Now, back to dependencies and being dependent and being independent. It has long been my experience that humans are what I would refer to as pod animals. Like, we're sort of a cross between pod animals and superorganisms. But the weird thing is, in our resemblance to superorganisms, we don't do what the superorganisms tend to do, like the Hymenoptera, the ants, bees, and wasps, particularly those kinds and termites. They form a very complexly distributed organism, right? They're like a single organism distributed in thousands of millions of bodies. And they maintain coherence in all kinds of astonishing ways that include pheromone transfer and caste relations. And so you have soldiers and workers, and you have the queen, and you have some males, and things are weird. It's really science fiction-y, but we don't serve the queen when we form superorganisms. We serve representations. Shit that don't exist. And by exist, I mean to be alive in the domain of being, right? So we serve this kind of crap. We serve tokens and representations. We form religions, which actually divide us from what their story's about, ironically. And we suffer all kinds of other agonizing ironies and repercussions of our hubris. When this happens to us, we form superorganisms. We call these nations today. And corporations are like them too. That's not the only way we can do it. But if something is not at the center, something really deeply meaningful and alive and profound isn't at the center of our unity as peoples, as what we call nations or societies, then something really malignant gets in there and starts producing representations, right? And this is part of what religion is actually about, understanding whether or not you believe in anything having to do with gods or metaphysics. There's a lot of knowledge that can be gleaned from understanding religions without having to take them as being literal or even declarative of the nature of the divine or the nature of origin or, any of these things. It's a very sophisticated story, these religions. In any case, we are pod animals. We are like dolphins or dog packs or maybe prairie dog warrens, apes, chimpanzees, whales, orcas. We're pod animals. And what that means is that and you can see this in all of our representational sort of departure from our actual nature, right? You can see this in that like the way we form military hierarchies and stuff, right? We have sports teams, we form a number of differently titled military units and groupings, and our ships float in convoys, on and on and on, right? Just watch the humans and you'll see them doing this everywhere you look. Whether you're looking at a 7-Eleven, a university, an operating theater, a film company, you name it, it's got these little organ things and it forms a union out of like something like this, right? And the humans aren't really consciously aware that this is one of their fundamental properties as animals and one of their relational priorities as beings. But it is. And what we're used to doing, which we do very poorly when these little unions are represented rather than embodied, all of our otherwise amazing assets fuck up and become pathological. And by the way, that's what happens when you get independent humans. Just in case this isn't obvious to you, it's not a law, right? None of these things I'm saying are laws. They are perspectives. They are frames we can use to see clearly into some aspects of stuff that would otherwise confuse the fuck out of us, and usually does. And some of us, I'm not going to say that. See, even in my own mind, I have already developed something that resembles a pod, right? And what I mean by a pod is something not entirely unlike this. A group of each, relative, somewhat similar members that also have unique features, abilities, senses, perspectives, capacities for insight and awareness, and so on. And so, for example, I could say, it's not really true, but I could say that there is an aspect of my mind that is concerned with threat detection, right? I just looked over did you see that? Right, just as I was about to speak of it, and that wasn't an intentional thing, I checked for trouble, right? So you have an aspect that does threat detection, and you can think of it, I don't agree in general with doing this because there's much better models, but you could think of it as a computer program, because computer programs do something relatively similar. They run down a string of sort of if-then while loops over time, And there's a timing aspect, right, that refreshes the screen of my iPod every 1,000 times per second or whatever, 12,000, 75,000, 150,000. Things get refreshed, and even though we don't see, when we look at our computers operating, this timeline of little functions, right, that each are unique and that together form a coherent whole, something not entirely dissimilar from that is happening as our minds. Even though I'm not a big fan of the mechanical metaphor, because we don't resemble machines. Machines resemble mechanized functions, analogies of mechanized functions we are familiar with from our minds and relationships and behaviors and such. So I'm in danger of running out of time. But I have different aspects of my mind, right? There's a threat detector, there's an opportunity detector, I have a sense of humor. I have emotions that may come online and respond to something unexpectedly, where a moment ago I felt totally ordinary, I could feel really terrified in the next moment, or I could begin crying. I could even start right now to think about something that will make me cry and start crying. We have aspects of the mind that choose what to think about, and how often, and when, and why. And then we have aspects of mind that explain all of that and form theories and models. And so there's all these little organs we can think of, we can imagine. And I'd like you to imagine an organ trying to work by itself. Imagine your brain with no body and no senses. Sound like fun? Imagine your heart with no blood and no circulatory system. Think about your liver all by itself, or your pancreas, or your lungs, or any organ you care about, right? Your eye, completely useless on its own. So you can see that knowledge is kind of confusing, because we think of these organs as separate, and that's convenient for certain purposes, but there's no such thing as a separate organ. They all are part of this union that is my body, and that body is part of a union that has all kinds of transports that extend into everything that has ever lived or will live, in my view. But certainly I have relationships with everything that's alive right now, for absolutely certain. Zero mysteries or metaphysics needed. Now, when we're in pods that are good, we get the analogy of a family unit or a team. Now, that doesn't always work out well, particularly in modern situations, for reasons I probably don't have to explain to you. But sometimes it does work out very well. There are families that are unimaginably coherent and really function well together, and they each have unique roles and abilities and feelings of belonging and communion and reverence and awe and wonder and playfulness that are natural to the kind of incredible scope of our humanity, most of which we don't get a lot of experience of, most of us. Though some of us manage to do so, even in these really strange contexts that we're presently in. My point here, however, is that a point that can be made from technology. In order to triangulate, you need three positions. If you're inside a bad situation by yourself, you're in trouble, because you can't triangulate by yourself. And we have the same problem in language, because most of us, myself included, only speak a single language. I speak English formally. We cannot triangulate on identity from the perspective of multiple languages, which would give us, a person who could do that would be like a different species of Homo sapiens, cognitively, because the difference is like the difference between having one finger and having five. And even 3 fingers is a lot better than 1. So what I'm trying to get at is, pod animals like us depend on significant relational others to triangulate on meaning and identity and value and urgency and all kinds of things that I could go on forever about. And when we're broken out of meaningful pods and placed in representations of pods, we suffer and many of us go mad. But if we're in a particularly difficult situation, then we really need close, sober-minded, right? Not insane, intelligent, reliably intelligent, right? Their knowledge is reliable and we can feel confident in including them in our own minds and imaginations because we feel confident they at least won't make things worse, right? They won't lead us astray. And at best can help us navigate and help to correct our inner compass when that compass has been replaced by terror or crisis or poverty or illness or all 5 things and more or whatever. I realize I only named 4. But you know, you can leave a spot for mystery. Why am I walking not in the garden? I'm walking, oh, I guess I just got tired of walking back and forth in the small little garden. In any case, this won't be good. There's too many cars here. When things get rough, we need more trustworthy, close relations to help us understand, to help us manage and relate with unexpected situations that deviate from the predictability that we expect from something that's mostly not moving and just stays in one form all the time and that kind of crap. And by the way, you can think of all this structure around here, you can think of that as like the crispy surface of something under which there's something like hardened butter, and under that there's something like broiling butter, and underneath that there's something like flowing water. And what I'm getting at is this is an overlay, right? It's an overlay of stability in certain dimensions of time, space, and relation that gives the illusion of predictable stability. And since we commonly find ourselves in contexts like this, including inside our houses where everything's, except maybe our pets, and if there's a plant blowing in the breeze, everything's still, it's all dead. We made it so predictable that we don't have to attend it anymore, so we can then just become independent. In other words, go to sleep. In other words, be anesthetized. And in those boxes, we are inclined to become anesthetized to life and relation and change and meaning and adventure. But my point is simply, when things get rough and unpredictable like they are now in our culture, it's much more important then for us to forge neo-families, right? Allo-families. We need to belong to groups, even of 3 or 4 or 5 people, that are really meaningfully connected and that are orbiting something that is noble and beautiful and true, inspiring, reassuring, intelligent, heuristically sophisticated in the right ways. We need sobriety, particularly in the sense of resistance to overreaction, clear insight, concise communications. We need all these things, but essentially we need other trusted minds to sort of bounce ideas off of and bounce perceptions off of and use to correct our own perceptions and help to guide us when we're injured or confused or sick or there's a crisis, right? And what we're getting from our culture is the opposite of that. Not surprisingly, you can use that to make all kinds of money and gather all kinds of power, because once the humans are disoriented, they are easily had. All of us are like that. But our kind of animal depends fundamentally on having a meaningful role in an actual pod that we trust and is rewarding, and that we recognize and have like a felt sense of deep, meaningful belonging to. And this is why things like corporations or the army or the police or whatever organization you want to pick, with a few exceptions that are actually almost noble or maybe even, approaching true nobility, very few. This is why humans do this. This is why they make sports teams. Those teams are representations of something we've long ago lost. and people have the deepest kind of weird substitutive, like substitutioning response to that stuff, right? They're like, the sports team might as well be, I don't know, their angel, their god, their tribe, what? Something. It's like, you'll see people have reactions they'll have in no other place of their life, right? Watching a basketball game, or a baseball game, or a football game, or a soccer game. Stadiums, thousands of people will split into two and start attacking each other over a soccer game, right? Why is that? You ever wonder about that? Give it some thought. This stuff's important and interesting. And there's all kinds of explanations, not just mine. But it's still important to understand. We are missing something from our common experience, and it's not inconceivable that we can return that something to our common experience, but we first have to know something about what was missing, and we'd have to have the ability to understand what it means to assemble these little pods, these little allofamilies, and then we would have to intend to do that and be willing to work with the fact that we're not very good at it yet, and we're going to make mistakes, and Joe's going to sleep with Tammy, Robert's wife, and whatever, like someone's dog is going to get hit by a car, like things are going to happen, right? That we're unprepared for and that we don't want to happen. Because we're human. We're not perfect. So if we want to do something like this, and I think we have to, actually, and in fact I strive to do it, and we can do it with as few as 2 people, you know, at least when the heart gets together with the liver, it's a little better than the heart or the liver by themselves, right? But each person has unique skills and assets that they bring and express in a meaningful way inside a little allo family, even if it's only temporary, even if it only lasts an hour, so that we can, who knows what, go to see a lecture together, stop and have wine and discuss it afterwards, right? People form pretty good pods, PGP, rather spontaneously, often. But if they're oriented to do this in a meaningful way, in a way that protects all of the members and gives them benefits they can't get elsewhere, creates a ladder of accomplishment and learning and intelligence and new opportunities for everyone in the group, as it just naturally does what it does, that would be miraculous, and a lot like what we were born for as humans. But I was speaking with a friend today, and it was very apparent to both of us that you can't go independently into crisis. I mean, can't? Okay, sure, you can. It's not going to work out well in, the vast majority of cases. Again, there are forms of independence that are relatively trustworthy and useful, but those aren't generally accessible to the common person. These are life paths that are uncommon, often very painful, sometimes extremely lonely, isolating, dangerous, fraught with peril. But it's not impossible if that's, the way you absolutely think is the right way. However, there are loner dolphins. There's probably loner whales. I'm guessing. Loner apes, maybe. I kind of doubt it, unless they're really sick or something. So we need each other, and we need each other more. When the context itself, the familiar, seemingly stable context in the between of everything, has gone to shit, which is exactly what is going on right now. 12 ways to Sunday, in layers we can't even observe, in some layers that I'm going to claim humans don't even know exist, right? There's sudden, shocking transformation in layers of the great everything around here, right now, that are deeply weird and terrifying. And if we're going to get any kind of reasonable, non-insane, handle, grasp, awareness, insight, so on, into our situation, we're going to need intelligent, trustworthy others to examine it together with. And if we form those relationships, will help us to maintain some semblance of actual sanity the good kind. I don't just mean clean, cleanness. And, they will help us to form trustworthy orientations in otherwise incoherent noise, right? Like right now, the noise floor in common media and signaling is so high that even people who are really good at disambiguating it are overwhelmed. So this is a time when we really need intelligent, sober, few close people with whom we check in with, right? And ask them questions like, what's your sense of blah, blah, blah? Are you dreaming? How's your health? Basic, like, we're checking in, right? We're going to triangulate on the situations that we are experiencing together, instead of me having a kind of insane and maybe even, what's the right word? Well, a theory that I'm very compelled by that doesn't actually match much or any of what's actually going on around me. And this is what happens to people who become isolated, is they tend to form these because they start collecting evidence, and the evidence isn't really for an actual case, it's for something that doesn't exist yet. They start collecting evidence, they get a lot of evidence, the evidence acquires gravity, right? Because it's so massive, this pool of evidence, that suddenly in a lightning flash it all links up and develops gravity and becomes like a star of terror or megalomania or psychosis in their minds. Or even just incoherent confusion, right? You've got a story, it's the wrong story, you're totally married to it. Right? This is all my fault is a really common one. And there's lots of factors of our disembodied abstract society that want everybody to believe that, because they want them to believe it's a society of individuals, and in a society of individuals, everything's your fault. You're sick, it's your fault. You're the only one there, right? You get injured, it's your fault. It's all your fault. It's a blame game that doesn't work out very well. That doesn't mean that I don't recognize usefully and with some sobriety the importance of personal responsibility, right? These two things can coexist. It's not one or the other, as in many of our flat, insane narratives that we form by being independently minded. Now, there's also virtues in independence from the crowd, but that doesn't mean that it is not uncommon for even very intelligent people to become confused. And to believe, for example, two kinds of rhetorical fallacies. One, that because something's popular, it's necessarily true. Well, just about everybody thinks that blah, 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 blah. That has nothing to do with whether something is reasonable or sane or sober or intelligent or even creative. And the other fallacy is, yeah, all those sheeple are believing blah, 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 so it must not be true. That's just as dumb as the first one. Both of those rules will get you killed, and they'll get your friends and family and pod members killed. Rhetorical fallacies are something we do have a responsibility to learn together and teach each other. And these are both fallacies of popular appeal. Or, some of the fallacies, if you just invert them, you get another fallacy, and this is the case, right? The popular people believe it, it must be true. The popular people believe it, it must not be true. No, you evaluate ideas based on all kinds of factors that might even slightly include, like, hey, how many people are talking about this? Because sometimes that's what brings it to your attention in the first place, right? So it's included, see? Even though you don't include it in your evaluation whether it's true or not, it becomes a topic because it's popular. So it's part of the, it's part of the situation that we just get its value wrong. And then we flatten things out and we form rules, right? Not we, but some of us do this. And I'm presenting these things so that we can be aware of them and avoid them, both. That's simply not intelligent, right? If you're doing either of those things, you're missing something really important, which is the capacity to disambiguate layers, constellated layers of data and ideas, perceptions, observations, theories, and link these up in a way where you can validate or invalidate it, and not just because you think it looks right? You gotta have some tests, right? If you want to know if your stuff's good, you got to test it carefully. And you don't test it to prove it, you test it to defeat it, right? You come at it from every direction you possibly can to defeat it first. And then if it survives all that stuff, that's probably reliable information, right? If it falls down, it's probably not reliable information. It's relatively simple. This isn't critical thinking 1A, but it's close, right? This is how you tell. You try to tear it down. You don't tell by getting up on top of it with a flag and a gun and going, that's not intelligence, that's megalomania or insanity or whatever, right? So, my simple point though is that as individuals, we're kind of fucked, right? None of us, we were made to be organs in bodies, in teams. And most of us are best in that way. We just don't find in our culture or societies this on offer. We have to either build it ourselves, right? And that's a complex process that most of us are going to emulate shit we've seen in culture and society because we've never done it alone. And you can't just walk up to strangers and go like, do you know what a pod is? Do you want to be like part of a team that helps each other to learn and survive and grow and understand what's going on more and more intelligently and more skillfully as time goes on, and maybe even has the power to manipulate the representational frames and contexts in which we're all enmeshed directly from above them? Does that sound interesting to you? I mean, people are going to go like, Darren, yes, it does. Can we do that now? And I'll say, maybe. There are some preliminaries that have to be dealt with too, and some pragmatic problems that have to be dealt with before that's easy, although it's usually easy, at least, I mean, we can do it when we want to, at least as one of the overlays in our complex life, which can still include membership in things like the United States and the state of California and Greenpeace, or the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, and different kinds of memberships, and I'm a renter and whatever, I have this medical plan, right? In all those overlays, right, there's a place for the pod overlay if we want to build it, and we should build it. This is part of the promise of romantic love, by the way. This is part of why people fall in love, because they're tired of being an organ by itself. And they want feedback, and they want mirror, like emotional mirroring and all kinds of things, because this is the kind of animal we are. We're evolutionarily inclined toward behaviors like those I here described, which means we are not inclined against those behaviors in the ways that our, society of independence keeps hammering home in really bizarre ways, because we are the most enslaved independent people I have ever wished I didn't have to imagine. And if I have to like paint that on a chalkboard for you, how that's true, that would be unfortunate, because it should be really, really obvious, right? We are enslaved 5 ways to Sunday. And in fact, we're so enslaved that our conveniences further enslave us, right? Stuff that's supposed to liberate us has the opposite fucking effect. Stuff that's supposed to make us smarter largely makes us dumber, most of the time. So we could do with some dependence, We could do with recognizing our dependence on what the shredded remains of the anciently conserved ecologies. We could do with some dependence on people who are actually capable of producing viable intelligence in a crisis or a time of opportunity. We could use some dependence on people who care for us authentically, deeply, and with whom we feel we belong, and for whom we might be willing to give our lives, not just because there's some representation of unity, but because there's an actual unity that we inhabit the between of meaningfully, skillfully, with sobriety and reverence and care and wonder and awe and playfulness, intelligence, creativity. We all need this. I'm not telling everyone what to need. Hey, live the way you like. But human beings in general, yes, I'm making a generalization here, or at least some large segment of them, we could really benefit from some dependence, because the spiritual myths of personal sovereignty and surpassing the need for the care of others, these aren't entirely myths. Maybe I misspoke. The spiritual program of achieving freedom from the self and from, what we refer to as dependent phenomenon in Buddhism and such like this. That's a different topic, right? It doesn't invalidate the topic that I'm here discussing. That's a separate layer. That's like the layer of deep life path work and meditative work, the quest for awakening, or the thing that we really shouldn't call enlightenment. That's a separate topic. And that topic and the topic that I am discussing here actually relate with each other, right? In that if we're going to work toward goals like those, we should also embody something compassionate, intelligent, and clear-minded in our actual daily activity and jobs, vocations, relations, the way we forge societies. And we have to start forging societies, because the ones that come pre-forged are pre-infected with pirates and shit and rapists and fucking terrifying soldier things and all kinds of crap. And they're not infected with rewarding roles for you and me, right? We're going to get something far other than rewarding roles for you or me if we subscribe to most of the crap that's already going on. So we have to do something different from that. And I envision small, extremely skillful little, sort of the Allo family analog of a complex intelligence unit that can intrude on any context and just sort of manipulate it for their own benefit, in ways that are humane and noble and heroic and sort of Robin Hoodish. I envision something like that. I envision a future where humans will return to this incredibly skillful capacity to form and deploy teams together with and for each other for the history and future of life on Earth, not to make explosions in the sky of gunpowder on days that remember something that right now has been pretty much perfectly ironically counterfeited, if there was anything good about it in the first place. Some may think that unpatriotic, but in a sense, there's a difference between the letters of patriotism, right, adhering to the letter, and adhering to the spirit. And I am inclined to the latter. Hopefully you are too. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye for now.